Welcome to the World Builders Anvil, episode 165. Today's topic.
Jeff, tell them this one was my idea.
Jeez. This was Michael's idea. Quick start guide for
So this was the
games.
one that Jeff was supposed to do last week, but he made me do the other one.
And yes, Michael's been whining for a week.
Are you going to tell them what it is? Because I didn't hear you.
The quick start guide for one-shot games.
That's a good idea.
Don't know where to start building your fantasy world? Do you need more? Does it make sense? Forget any worries and become a crafter of imagination. This is the place that will help prime your mind. Now, it's time to heat up the forge, break out the mithril ingots and hammer. Welcome to the World Builders Anvil. I'm your host, Jeffrey W. Ingram. Let's sup from the mug of Java and build.
Welcome back. As always, my name is Jeffrey W. Ingram.
And I am Michael Miller.
Yes. Yes, he is. And so I usually like to do more world building episodes, but we have to do this one so Michael will stop whining to me.
Yeah, because last week's episode was basically Jeff's cobbled together bastardization of my original idea, which is what this one is. This one was my idea.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes. You know, if you do the show notes, you could send them to me. Oh, wait.
Look, hey, I work full time, unlike you. I don't have the kind of time that you have.
Just because this is my job doesn't mean it's not work. I'm talking about role play.
Yeah, we're talking about time, though. It's a time thing.
Yeah, wine for me, baby. Okay.
No, this was wine for me.
Yeah, so Michael's on the alcohol. Welcome to the show, folks.
Oh, well, to be clear, I just washed down a couple of pills with the wine, so I'm doing.
That's what we call cocktailing.
I'm doing both.
Excellent. So, if you hear Michael fall down, just call 911. It will probably be too late since this won't release until later.
2 weeks later, yeah. But I appreciate the sentiment, so don't dial 911. I'll be fine.
Yeah. Yes, please don't. Please do not do that.
So today we're talking about building and like what you're going to do as a GM for it doesn't have to be a one shot, but that's kind of what we were thinking. Like a one shot.
You can't change that scenario because it's a huge difference.
What's that?
It's a huge difference. The shorter the time frame of the game, the more planning you have to do. So it makes a huge difference.
Do you really think so?
Time to it. Yes.
You think that you need to do more planning for a one shot than you do for a campaign?
If you want it to go off well, yes, you do. You have to do more planning. If you're very experienced and the players know you in your world, you can get away with a lot more. But in general, I think you need to do more planning for a one shot to make it go off because it's about timing. It's about the players achieving points and you knowing where they're at. So it is there's more planning to it.
I know that this never happens, but I might argue with you this episode.
Well, you could be wrong this episode as well. Okay.
Fair enough.
All right. So to start off, I think there are two forms of games that work really well in the one-shot scenario, and those are mission-based games. And objective-based might be a little bit better to say because the mission's usually like, you're part of a unit being sent off to do something. But it could also be like you're trapped in a haunted house. It could be you're surrounded by a creepy white light doing a podcast with someone. Whatever the game is. Actually, I look very Halo-y with the lack of light in the room that I'm in.
Well, see, if we're going to sit here and talk about all the things that the listeners cannot see, then I'll ask you to do what I have done. I've done this just for you. In front of me, there is a desk lamp that I have diffused with a piece of paper so that you can see me in the camera. That's why I look so beautifully lit, and you look like you're in a darkened room hiding in someone's closet.
I see dead people.
Yeah. Right now, I imagine you tucked behind somebody's clothing, staring at them while they change.
I'm researching Bigfoot, okay?
You're not going to find Bigfoot in the closet. Now tell your neighbor that you're there and leave.
I know. Shh, we have to be more quiet though.
We got to be quiet. They'll know. Push the jackets out of the way, Jeff.
Yeah, but I do think mission-based games work really well.
I'm sorry. The neighbor comes in trying to grab pants, and you're like, I'm only in here for the acoustics. The headset and microphone. Don't mind me. Just trying to record a show.
Yeah, could you quiet down? We're trying to record in your closet. Yeah. So back to the topic of the day.
One-shot GMing.
One-shot GMing. Mission. I don't do a lot of these. I'm a storyteller, and I like long, drawn-out stories. I like really drawing out the torture I do to my players. So I have done them more. The most recent games I've done have been mission-based games, where I had the group was members of an orc raiding party, or a orc tribe that was raiding into the outer communities, and I also did a couple one-shot special forces games for some of my friends.
Let me back it up for just a second. I realize that there may be a lot of writers and world builders out there that don't know what we're talking about. I assume that they do, but just the old Stanley adage, everybody's comic book. Every comic book could be somebody's first comic book. Every podcast could be someone's first podcast. A GM is a game master for tabletop role playing. You may have also heard DM, dungeon master, and one shot or one off. Well, it's when you're playing a game that for the evening or the session. Usually we play it at night. It could be a daytime or afternoon or whatever. Your plan is to sit down, play that session, and it finishes and completes in that session. Like you're not going to come back to that storyline at a later date or another time, which most tabletop role playing is an ongoing, continuing adventure, or at least a large campaign style story where you have plenty of time to get to those details. This is going to be like, we're just going to do this one thing tonight. That's it.
Yep, and you'll have your beginning, middle, and end in that evening. And you see these, like, I think most convention games are probably set up this way, where it's a one shot for that convention, or typically as your player groups get older and people are working and they have less time to run campaigns, it ends up becoming a way that you're kind of forced to play games sometimes. Or sometimes you're just getting together with friends and decide, hey, let's play a one shot. Those are the most fun typically, because it's just a group of friends having fun playing a game that they love.
Especially if you got a group of people who have played together before, and they know how to give and take. And in a one shot, you really need to be understanding. You need to work with each other, if only for time.
Yeah, and really this is really, I think, something. It's also more for more experienced players and game masters to do. Players don't have to be as experienced as a game master, I don't think, but they probably need a little bit of, like, you can't be explaining the system during the evening, so they at least need to understand the system enough to be able to go. But the more experienced they are, and the more experienced the group is together, the easier these become. And the last bullet point works really well in those scenarios. Now, once you pick what the mission's going to be, is sort of building a quick 3-story act about it, and creating your story outline. And I do believe that these need to be better planned out than other things. I will have more NPCs figured out in this. It will usually be a smaller, more confined setting. So like, it's not going to be like an open world. It's not going to be a Bethesda style video game in a one-shot session. You're not going to give the players the free reign that you would normally. And if they go out of bounds, you just kill them. Just kill them. Oh, you step through that door, you get electrocuted. Wow. Just because. It's an electric universe.
Send Michael in first. Wait, is there prizes behind that door? Yeah, there's prizes. You go first. So if I go through this door, you promise me the prizes. It'll be a surprise, I can tell you that much. No, you said prizes. Well, I'm saying surprise now. So it's not a prize. It's a
It is a
surprise.
present for the other side of the door, Michael. That's for sure.
I will say this: it is just for you. Go on. Go open the door.
But why are you calling me Michael? That frightens me.
Well, that is what you want on the gravestone, right? Yes, I opened the door. Oh, good.
And this is a good time, like when you're an experienced game master, you've built up resources over time. And this is going to show the brilliance of Jeffrey here. Back in episode 164, we were talking about how I use Excel for creating sort of NPC logs. Well, when I'm done playing those games, they all get shoved into a master Excel file for my world. So I have tracks of hundreds of characters that I've used throughout the time in different locations in different places. So if someone's in the right place at the right time, I might know who the ruler is there or the town guard or whoever I might need. There will probably be at least a couple of characters that could be there. If you have a rapport with players, there are a lot of times reoccurring characters that will show up even if they're not related to the story, not needed, or really add no value outside of their characters that are loved by the players, NPCs that they've grown to, well, either love or hate. The two classics of mine are Eric, the mage, or Otto. Those two would show up and interact with the players and cause them frustration in almost every game I was in. Not every session necessarily, but every campaign, or not one shot, but you're more likely to see at least one of those two guys. But that way it's like you're playing to your audience. So if there's something that they like, you throw them the red meat. If you're going to have notes like when players like open the book, you can have the note pre-written out that tells them what they're going to get from the book, and then they will have the choice at that moment to share or not with the group, or the group can start fighting at that moment to figure out what's in the book as well too. But pre-write out all that stuff. Have maps prepared for all of your areas, because you don't want to sit there and be struggling with the layout of a village, because if that's important to the story, you want to flow through it. So if it's important and they're going through it, have it prepared ahead of time. I think these games take more preparation, like I said, than a campaign does, because a campaign you can kind of wing stuff. You can just sort of go with it and sort of make notes of what you're writing down and realize later that you did it horrible, but whatever. You just blow up the town with an army later on. So if you have prepared stuff, use settings you're familiar with, or that are simple enough. Like a fun one I played in was a Night of the Museum style game, and the host in for Monster at the Ottawa Capital Gamers Convention. And that was it's a very small, very simple setting. All of the scenes took place there. So that's another way that you can simplify it. But you need to keep those things simple. You need to know enough about the area to be able to go in and not struggle with that part of it. Because the thing is, you need them to flow from the plot to the climax to the conclusion within a predetermined period of time.
Now, you also have right at the top here, mission or Monty Hall style game. I know what a mission is, and I think that's pretty self-explanatory. But what do you mean by a Monty Hall style game?
Yeah, I guess that's what we should be doing on the show. So a Monty Hall style game, I don't know if that's even in the lexicon anymore, or if that just shows how old I am. Essentially, it's meant to be just a comic one-off game. So it's this old game show host called Monty Hall. And so I don't know if people still use that terminology anymore, or maybe no one but me ever used it. I'm not sure where I even got it from. But essentially, are games that are it's meant to be more slapstick kind of humor. Nothing's meant to be serious at all in it. Everything's a joke. Your characters are jokes. The players' characters are jokes. And the delivery can be whatever. And so there's just no earnestness in the game. It's just all fun. It's just meant to be fun. And you can actually do less planning in those too. So they're a little bit easier if you can deliver the humor. Now, the next thing is keep Post-it notes on hand. You always have these greedy players that want to plot against the party. and they want to drag you.
Yeah, not that I.
They want to drag you off in the other room, and I've kind of done this for years, where paper gets passed back and forth. And actually, listening to Seize the GM on my day trip the other day, one of the GMs there uses Post-it notes because they can write something on the Post-it note, fold it closed, and hand it to the player. And since I love using Post-it notes for planning, I have 10 million of them. So if you have some Post-it notes, that's a good thing to do. So it gives it more of a sense of it's for you. Pass this to not Michael, because Michael actually is not one of those kind of gamers. He's usually a team player. Yeah. You're not one of those typically plotting against the group all of the time. That's not your archetype.
Not my thing.
And now the next thing to keep in mind is, and this was especially like when I was playing I was running a special ops game for some people at their request. I used to be a soldier. You should run a special ops game for us. I'm like, okay. And so I was doing that. And, but I kept control as the game master of the chain of command. So essentially the special forces team were the players, and I was the command and control outside of it. So I could, if need be, apply artificial pressure on them to change the dynamic of the game in the way I wanted to. So like if you wanted to start adding pressure to the players, you could do that. And I thought like a great use here is, you want to lead players in a position that makes them, especially in a game like that, to be in a situation where they feel the pressure to do something that they personally feel is wrong. For example, one of my targets in those style of games is, you want to create the situation where, you have this small group of people who are very isolated, and if they get noticed, they're in great danger, sort of the lone survivor scenario, where, you have essentially a special forces team doing what they call a listening operation, where they're just listening in to this camp of bad guys, huge, large camp of bad guys, a small group of American special forces. You have a scenario where this one child who's a goat herder comes up over a crest to where they're listening from, sees your people. You have guns on this kid. You probably should shoot and kill this kid, because if the kid screams out and points out your location, there's a large camp of people who are going to attack you very quickly. And in those style of games, I like throwing in the moral difficulty of situations, because as a human being, whoever wants to shoot a kid? And you need good players to play that kind of game too, because if it's just a sort of a power action player, they might not take the moment to appreciate that decision and just do the correct thing, which is to shoot the kid. And I hate to say that, but it probably is the military correct thing to do, because you're protecting the lives of your unit as you kill the kid as quickly as possible. Because you do it quietly, because if you don't, you risk every team member. And so you want to, when you work in those kind of elements, you can start adding pressure to them about the importance of the mission. So you want to add the pressure so that they do the right thing, but you want the character to regret it at the same time. So when you control the command structure on the outside, you can play with the emotions a bit more of a player. Now, I typically don't worry about this as much in campaigns, because if players take command positions, sometimes they get bullied by the game master, and like, you're not going to do that, because, or understand that there are consequences if you do that. If you're the king and you refuse to kill your stepbrother who tried to overthrow your kingdom, there will be a political price that you pay for not doing that. Your nobles will respect you less. The chance of revolt by them will increase. Do you want to not kill your half brother who tried to overthrow your throne? Because in the modern day context, it's wrong to kill someone. But in more ancient times, you're defending your property, and your kingdom is yours. So those are kind of things. But when you're doing a one-shot game, when you keep control of those kind of people, and not just the antagonist, but the people on the side of the good guys who can apply those pressures, I think it can lead to better storytelling, which for me is always the key. I always want it to be a good story, even if it's for fun. I want the story to be compelling and give something to the players as a thank you for taking their time out to play with you, because it brings them back the next time. So and one way to do that is use command and control procedures. And it's a little bit more cheesy if you have to sit there and the general, calls up the guy on the phone who's sitting there looking at this kid saying, you have to shoot him. You don't do that. But, before you get to that position where he has to make that call, you want him to feel the pressure of the chain of command is like ready to come down if they don't get some good information from this camp. If this mission isn't a success, maybe his career's over. Maybe he's there because his family is sick and he can't afford to leave because he can't afford medical insurance on the outside because he's only ever been a combat arms soldier and doesn't want to become a mercenary when he gets out. So,
you want to make the player have a difficult choice. You don't want it to be an easy choice. I was running something where I had someone who had never played something like role-playing before, but he seemed to get it. And it was a zombie style thing. And I had all these neat little things hidden for them to find.
Is this that board game that you liked where you sort of modified it into a mini RPG?
Yes. I modified it into a mini RPG, because I may or may not have been playing in that one, but I created a system where there was a bit of randomness to it, so I couldn't manipulate what was occurring. I couldn't just go, oh, well, you find this or you find this. They had to roll dice to figure out what was going on. And if they went into a room, there was a random thing in there, and they rolled the dice, and I took whatever they rolled and compared it to what I had on a sheet, and that determined what thing they found in that room. It might be a random encounter of enemies. It might be a special object. Well, one of the guys came into this room, and he found a baby.
The story.
And
this is a great story. Continue.
And the point is that there was a whole bunch of things spread out on the map, and there was this baby, but there was also the baby's parents. Now, if you chose to leave the baby in the room, you didn't get anything. But if you decided to pick the baby up and take the baby with you, there would also, underneath of the baby or lying nearby the baby that you didn't notice at first, was a helpful weapon. Now, if he picked up the baby was going to start making noise. And thus, I justify giving them a helpful weapon, because now zombies nearby are going to hear the baby and come after him. And he's going to need to defend himself and the baby. He chooses to immediately kill the baby.
Wow.
My jaw dropped. I'm like, what? I'm like, what? You're killing the baby? I'm like, and now mind you, this is like a 40-some-odd-year-old man, and he's playing a young woman. Like, his character is like a 25-year-old waitress who works at the restaurant around the corner. And I kill the baby. I'm like, keep in mind the character you're playing. And he goes, she's putting her out of her misery. Think of Carol in Walking Dead. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, I got to give you, he had a basis. He had a justification for what he was doing. I didn't like it, but I couldn't deny this. Like, all right, fine, you kill the baby.
Yeah, and that's one of those things where I try and explain to people, especially a lot of times when they do military stuff, they want it to be as realistic as possible. And whether they're video games or they're role-playing games, there has to be an understanding that none of these can ever be realistic, because a life's not really at risk. It's a lot easier to make the choice to not shoot the kid when you yourself aren't going to die. Your character could be doomed, but you'll be fine. And so some people, where they do take on their character's lives like their own, most people don't. So you can never really simulate, a combat situation outside of combat because the ultimate sacrifice is a lot less likely. But you just got to go with it sometimes, and I think that would be a very difficult choice to make. However, I've never been in a zombie apocalypse either. Maybe that's, a sound device. Quiet it. I guess so. That's oof. But yeah.
You swaddle. What you do is you swaddle, and that creates a silence around the baby. You swaddle.
I thought you said shoot. I'm sorry. I heard you wrong.
Yes.
You want to swaddle? Roll your D20.
Swaddle.
Roll your D20. Oh, critical failure. You kill the kid.
You wrap that kid.
Its head explodes.
I should have you come over.
I
and
have
play
played
that
that game with
sometime.
you. I had a lot of fun with you. I had a lot of fun that evening. That was a good evening. Yeah,
you did come over.
I was over at one of your zombie nights. There was a couple. There was another guy there, and was there maybe a couple as well?
Were you there for the baby killing?
No, I would have remembered the baby killing.
You weren't that? Because I know there were 3 people at the table.
And I wasn't there the whole night because we live a distance away, and at the time I was working very early the next morning, so I don't get so I probably left earlier than the game. So it could have been the same night, but I wasn't there the whole night either. So I don't know, but if you get a chance, if Michael invites you over, go play zombie games at his house. They're fun. Yes, and so and the next point here is very important for all GMs.
While we're on that, I'll just drop it. It's called Zombicide. Okay. So if you've never played Zombicide, check it out. It's an amazing game.
And I don't know how good it is if Michael, because I know he's tweaked it before I played it, so I don't know exactly what's different, but there's some more RPG elements in the way he does it. So it's probably fun either way, but Michael's way of doing it is probably better for me at least.
Yeah, it's more formulaic. Like it's more the way they do it. It's much more formulaic, and while I follow those rules, I tack on a deeper layer.
And I've found.
And I also like it when the play. I also like it when the players take on the roles of the characters. I find that to be very rewarding.
Okay.
So to that end, maybe you could talk about pre-built characters.
Yeah. So pre-built characters, I prefer to have pre-built characters for one-shot games because I did completely jump over that one. And I play GURPS, especially if you play a game system where character creation can be longer for people who aren't experienced at the game. You'll want to do this because you don't want to spend the entire evening creating characters. Usually, but there's a quirk system in GURPS. So usually what I'll do is I will have quirks that they can use for the character, or I'll let them do it themselves because quirks really are a great way in GURPS to sort of flesh out the personality of a character quickly. They're sort of like little 1-point things.
I was waiting for you to complete.
They're little 1-point additions to the character, but it's stuff that says that you just hate the color blue, and it's not like you're going to go into a blinding rage and murder people who wear blue, but you just dislike it, and when people wear it, it annoys you. So there are things like that which help flesh out and make a character belong to someone, but you've gone through the legwork and said, okay, this is a thief you're playing. This is the spellcaster you're playing. Yes. So it saves a lot of time, and it gets people into the right positions to know each other to get the game rolling off correctly.
If you're going to play a system in your one shot and you don't have pre-built characters, if you're going to play something like GURPS or D&D or whatever, here's my recommendation. Have them roll dice and maybe add some modifiers or maybe give them a couple of re-rolls. Have them roll their basic stats. So now you've got basic stats. Have them pick out 3 quick quirks, not something that's a real big advantage or disadvantage, just a little quirk about the character. That way that gives them a little sense of ownership of the character and a little bit of personality they can develop as the story goes. As the story progresses and as they run into scenarios and circumstances, you allow them 3 things, and you can choose 4 or more or whatever, but I'm saying 3. 3 advantages that the character gets, and you get to choose them on the fly. That way, they're in the scenario. They say, oh, you know what would be good for this scenario? If I had this. And say, boom, okay, you have that. But that's one of your things. So now for the duration of the game, that's the only good thing that you're going to get. So you can do it that way. In circumstances where you don't have pre-built characters, even if you have experienced players and you have to roll them out, it can take a lot of time. Like a lot of times what we had done in those scenarios is not even bother with character sheets and just say, okay, you're playing a me character, which means the character is based off of the player. Like they have your exact stats, and we won't be putting you in such jeopardy that's going to be ridiculous. You know, those ones where you're like, okay, you're playing a U-style character, but Argomatron, the super robot mage across the street, is blowing up the building, and it's about to fall on you. So what do? Be like, I run. Oh, you can't outrun a falling building, so you die. That's the type of thing Jeff would do to me. But I am not encouraging you to do this to players.
Yeah. And one of the most important things, if you have a Michael archetype player at your table, kill him off before any important conversational scenes. His character will be so screwed up in the head that it'll drag out the scene way too long. Just kill him off before those scenes happen.
You got to understand that if it's an important scene, then it's because I was part of it. So if you remove me from the equation, you can't have any important scenes left. It would be a sad, takeaway from your story.
Just kill off the Michael characters.
Don't do it. Don't do that. It's bad.
And here's the last most important one. And I wouldn't say do this for a con or anything like that, but if this is you and your friends at a table, just fucking wing it and pray. Because you know what? You probably told a lot of stories in your life. Go with it. Have your character list there if you get stuck looking for a character. But, just one-shot games can just be fun too. And if that's the point of the game, don't do all the prep work. If the point of the game is to deliver a good story, it takes a lot more prep work. But if it's for fun, for people to have conversation and enjoy each other, do that as well too. But you know what? There's nothing wrong with winging it.
There's also something that I really want to say about tabletop role-playing in general, and even writing. I threw this out there for our second writing project. And guys, I'm still waiting to hear any updates on the second writing project. By no means is this me pressuring you. I'm just curious about the process. There's only four people working on the second project. It's a partners project, and I'm just curious about what's going on. So I'll probably put something on the Undercroft group soon. Just checking in on you guys. But a story, even a book, even a full-blown novel, does not need to be doesn't need to be a world-saving endeavor. There's a lot of great tales out there that cover massive scale, and there's also a lot of really awesome stories out there that don't do that. Like, don't feel pressured to cover the entire globe and have that classic, basically like, JRPG style thing where you've got the local town boy who then, becomes the super powerful guy, and he meets a ragtag group of people who are like-minded, and they're against the emperor, and eventually they'll find the super stone and slay the dragon and then bring the emperor down. Like, it doesn't need to be all that. Some of the coolest little intimate stories are very interesting and very fun, and you get to meet a small group of characters. You get to spend more time with them, and it's not about saving the entire world. One of my favorite books is actually the one that Dawn wrote, because it's not about saving the world. It's about saving a few people. It's about saving the people they can save. And because of that, and you spend much more times with all the people who have the special abilities and they're trying to, save people. So the book Luminous is what I'm talking about. If you haven't read it, get into it. It's a perfect example of what I'm talking about, where not the entire world is on the line, not the entire kingdom is on the line. Like, small stories I find super interesting too. And just like one-shots, like what we're talking about here, even if your one-shot doesn't have to be completely isolated. It can take place within a larger mythology. You can stick with the world you've already been building and creating. Maybe just go 2 or 3 towns over from your main storyline, and this can be just a little thing that takes place there.
One of my favorite recent television series, which actually is going to make me agree with Michael for once.
I want that on record.
This has been recorded this time, so I'm screwed. But the miniseries called Rome. It was an HBO series with all of the good traits of an HBO series, and I really liked it because it kind of got in depth into showing what could have really possibly been some cultural things that were around at the time. But it's the retelling of a very well known story. The Julius Caesar, Cleopatra, and then Cleopatra and Mark Antony stories, and Octavian mixed in for the finale. And so the thing is, this story I think a lot of people are very familiar with. But the thing is, the 2 characters it focuses on are 2 legionaries. And they're picked for a very specific reason. They are the only 2 plebes to show up in the writing of Julius Caesar. He showed up in the memoirs twice. And one of the best parts of the miniseries is at the beginning when they steal Julius Caesar's eagles. He sends these 2 guys off to get them. And they assume it's a death sentence because they just can't come back without them. And they happen to get the eagles back, which is how they got mentioned the first time in his memoir, because these guys actually went out and got his eagles back for him to save them the huge embarrassment of losing his standard, which is very bad in military terms. But the thing that was neat was, even though there's this big story of world-shaking events happening, that's not the perspective of the story. The story is about people just making it through their life during those times. So you can even have these big epic things happening in the background of a much smaller, much more intimate story. And I think that's fascinating. So, and I like all kinds of stories. I like your big political stuff. I like your small, intimate stuff. They're all good. But like Michael said, definitely, and then one-shots, it'd be very difficult to save the world in a one-shot and have it feel correct. It almost feel cheap, like, wait, we just walked in and killed one thing and game over and we saved the world, yay. You don't get the impact in a short one shot, I think, for actually doing something huge, building up the villain to being this person who could actually take out and destroy the world of this or this country or whatever. It's hard to do that build up and deliver that in a short story. Intimate stories work much better. That's why I like your mission based games, or your just fun Monty Hall games where it's just kind of slapstick humor. So that is really all we got for setting up your one shot. I hope you had fun. Our next episode will be something a little different. Probably back to world building again. Because I love world building, and maybe we'll talk about 101,000 games that you should develop for your game world next. I don't know. But the real world task for the day is go run a one-shot game. Even if you're not a game master, go run one. Pick an easy system. We've used them before. I'll link a few easy ones. Dial In for Monsters, a great one. Matthew
Bannock's Descriptors is a great, simple system. I can't recommend that system highly enough because it is about making a story. It's not about getting caught up in mechanics. And I want to preface, there's been times where I've gotten a little poo-poo-ish on mechanic-based gaming. And I want to, on the record, state that mechanic-based games are important. Learning games that are mechanic heavy, that have a lot of math involved, are very important. The problem is that people will get too caught up in doing that given thing, and then they'll forget that the story is super important also. And a lot of that will depend on your
players, but
that distinction.
But especially for like me, me and the players I get involved with are story heavy. And I would also be disappointed if I played. I don't mind mechanics. I like them because they add an element, they add a layer of complexity to the story that you can't control. wait, the guy just shot an arrow in my eye. Whoops. What do you do with that? But so there's this neat thing with mechanics that add different kinds of fears and behaviors in a game because of the mechanics. But especially inexperienced storytellers sometimes become reliant on the mechanics to the point where either players will lawyer them into taking the game in a direction that's only good for that one player, or the game is about the mechanics and not about the story. And I think that's kind of what Michael's warning you against. Because I think even in the action games, the hack and slash games, you can do those and still have a good story. It's just more like Expendables kind of story or a Terminator kind of story than, Waiting for Godot, which would be really fun in D&D. So that's what you do. Just go ahead for your World Builder task and run a one-shot game of something. Let us know how it goes. And then for the real world task of the day, playing off Michael's last week, I didn't listen to him. I forgot to bring in my trash cans. They blew away. So come and help me find my trash cans. And then once again, go check out the Seize the GM podcast. I'll link it in this episode as well, too. So I hope you enjoy that. And let us know. And, hey, see you in a week.
This one was my idea.
Thank you so much for listening to the World Builders Anvil. We would love it if you would share the World Builders Anvil with 2 of your friends, and so would they. If they are unfamiliar with podcasts, then you get to introduce them to the wonderful world of podcasting by showing them Stitcher or iTunes, or, best of all, just send them to our website, www.gardul.com. That's GARDUL.com.
Now strike while the mithril's hot.